Welcome to Burn On, Not Out, the podcast for founders and CEOs who are done being the bottleneck. I'm Brooke Dukes. I want to tell you about a client of mine. She had built a services company and it was growing. It was profitable. She had a team that really was strong, right? They were qualified. They were lit up by what they were doing. They were in the right roles. They were ready to make things happen. She had a great list of clients. They were hitting their revenue numbers. They'd been growing consistently over years. And she was really proud of the business that she'd created. So from the outside, it looked like she'd had it all figured out. I mean, she was one of those people that women, men, everyone looked to me like, yeah, now that's a great leader with a solid company. But here's what was actually happening behind the scenes. She was working more hours than she'd ever worked in her life, even in the early days of the company when they were just starting out. The team was doing their jobs. Generally, they were doing good work. As I said, they were growing. And somehow she still couldn't step back and take a break. Every week, she had her calendar set. She had things blocked off. She had her to-do list. She knew Monday morning, she knew exactly what she was doing. She felt great. But then other things kept creeping in. Things ended up needing her. There are always urgent matters, fires to be put out, quick questions here and quick questions there, decisions that needed her input, situations that stalled unless she weighed in. So many times she heard herself saying when someone asked, "Hey, how you doing?" She, "Good, I'm a little tired." Or, "Yeah, good, just a little overwhelmed at the moment." Now, here's the thing. She wasn't overwhelmed because the company was struggling or because her team wasn't pulling their weight. She wasn't overwhelmed because the company was growing, but because the more it grew, the more it needed her time. And so as each new client that came in, more of her time was needed. Each new employee that came in, more of her time was needed. Each new offering that they had, more of her time was needed. And I remember her telling me, "I feel like I built the thing I always wanted, and now I'm trapped inside it." That's the story I want to spend this episode on, because I think a lot of you know exactly what she was feeling. I want to show you specifically what changed and how she did it. So let me paint you a picture of what her company looked like before we worked together. As I mentioned before, she had a really strong team. They weren't people that were underperforming. They weren't people that didn't care. People she'd hired carefully who showed up and were good at their jobs. And revenue was solid and growing steadily. On paper, successful. And yet, here's what a typical week looked like for her. Her calendar was full of what I call catch-up meetings. These are the things like check-ins, sync-ups, quick calls to resolve things that had all stalled because a decision couldn't move ahead without her okay. She was also regularly getting pulled into client situations that her team should have been able to handle. She wasn't being pulled in because her team was dropping the ball, but because no one had ever defined the boundary between handle it versus escalate it. And then she was the last to sign off on things that truly didn't need her sign off. But because there was no written structure saying otherwise, her approval had become the default. And here's a trap that you might also be familiar with. She was carrying knowledge that no one else in the company had, not because she was hoarding it, but because the company had grown around her in a way that required her to be the hub. The result was a capable team, great results, but the founder was completely underwater. This becomes particularly hard in a company that's growing when things are going well. It's really hard to justify slowing down to redesign the operating system. There's always something more urgent that's taking precedence. There's always a client to serve, a deal to close, a fire to contain. And there's always that little worry in the back of your mind, but if I slow down, will we be able to pick up the pace? Will we continue the growth at this level? And as many of you know, there is a time when sometimes you have to pause. You have to take a few steps back in order to catapult yourself forward. The growth and success of the company was actually making it harder to fix. I want to make one point here because I think it's really important. Her frustration wasn't that things were broken, because they weren't. I think we've established that, right? They were going well, great team, revenue building, all the things that most leaders would be like, yes, thank you. This is what I've been working for, right? It was that things weren't broken. That's what made it so hard. And she was still this busy. How do you justify changing something when from the outside it looks perfect? And you know that it's what every other leader on the planet is asking for. It's what they're hoping to accomplish in their business. You have it, and yet you're frustrated, you're overwhelmed, you're unhappy, you're not taking care of yourself, and you're wondering, should I even be doing this at all? Because here's the thing, at least when things are clearly broken, there's a roadmap. We teach people all the time how to fix something that's broken. You fix the broken thing and you're up and running again, easy. But when things are genuinely working and you're still running out of runway every week, you're still tired. The temptation is to turn inward and point the finger at yourself. The problem must be me. Am I not delegating enough? Am I too controlling? Do I have the wrong people? Or am I not trusting the right people? Is this just what being a CEO at this stage is actually like? Is everyone this stretch, or is it just me? Those worries, those concerns, they are on a loop in your brain every single day, and unfortunately every night when you wake up at 3 a.m. She tried working on delegation. She had conversations with her leadership team about owning their areas and making confident decisions. She read all the books, used the frameworks, and things would improve for a little while, but then slowly, without hardly noticing, the weight would drift back to her. That cycle, try to delegate, feel lighter, watch it drift back, try again, is one of the most common patterns I see. And I have lived this pattern time and time again, which is why we started teaching this as a really important part of our leadership operating system, because most leaders, especially most successful leaders, experience this. So many times I would be like, what is happening? I delegated this. It goes along and inevitably it comes back to me. Like, why? Well, what I recognized was I delegated the task. Do this. I never said, you own this. This is yours. Run with it. You don't have to come back to me to check in. I trust you. You got this. Even that, even nothing in writing, that would have made it easier. Just those words. But I made assumptions, which I find is it can be really tough as a leader. We assume people understand what we mean. It doesn't happen. What they understand is the actions that have happened in the past. Well, I had a tendency to reverse decisions. So that bled into every area of my business, even delegation. Because they know sometimes I would change my mind. Maybe I didn't want that. Maybe I wanted this. So they were constantly checking in. And so what I was doing by delegating, a lot of times, I was getting more put on my plate by delegating than I was if I had just done it myself. So then again, another question. Maybe I have the wrong people. Do I need to rehire? Do I need to train more? I mean, the questions went on and on. And here's the bottom line. It wasn't me. It wasn't the team. It was none of that. We were all killing it. Our team was growing. We had new clients. It was amazing. It was the system, which in reality, if you think about it, that's a much easier fix. We don't want to, it's much harder to change your whole leadership style up, hire all new people, or train anyone you have right now. Think how long that would take. It's structure, and it's easy structure. This cycle happens for a specific structural reason, because delegation without authority transfer doesn't hold. You can hand someone a task, But if you haven't handed them the right to make the call, the decision will still end up coming back to you. Okay, so I'm going to share with you how I changed all of that overwhelm and worry and decision reversal and delegation and all the things. So now I want to go into the actual work. What did we do in our company? What did we do with that woman's company? Because there's two things that we did that changed the operating pattern of each of our companies. And I want to walk through both of those with you really specifically. So first, we made a structural change called decision mapping by role. So a decision map is exactly what it sounds like. It's a written document that defines by role which categories of decision each leader owns. And I mean fully owns, where no founder check-in is required. And then which categories require escalation. So I get it, this sounds simple, and it is in concept, but almost no company at this stage has actually done it. What they have instead are job descriptions that describe responsibilities in broad strokes and an unwritten understanding that big decisions should come back to the founder. The problem is that that depends on the person who is evaluating. What might seem big to me may not seem big to you. It's all relative. So we built her the decision map. And a few things happened almost immediately. First, her leaders stopped asking for approval on things they already had the authority to decide, because now it was written down and they knew it. Even if it took a couple of times to be reminded, it didn't take them long to reclaim their authority. They liked it. They liked being empowered. Second, the escalation conversations that did happen were faster and cleaner, because now there was a framework that made the category of the decision explicit rather than it being ambiguous. This feels like something that Brooke should weigh in on. No, now they knew exactly in writing specifically what big meant and what should be brought back to me or not. And third, you stop getting pulled into the middle of operational decisions that you didn't need to be in, because the structure answered the question before it even gets to you. So the second thing that we did is establishing threshold criteria for escalation. A decision map tells you who owns which category. Threshold criteria tells you when to escalate, specifically and numerically, not based on feelings, intuitions, maybe, nothing, concrete. So here's an example. A client situation gets handled by the account lead unless it involves a financial exposure over a certain dollar amount, a contractual change, or a relationship that's been explicitly flagged as founder managed. Everything else, the account lead owns it. Very specific, no ambiguity there. So when those thresholds are written down, it's very explicit, written down, no ambiguity. Because it's the ambiguity more than the complexity of the decisions themselves that drives escalation back to the founder. People escalate not because they can't handle something, but because they're not sure if they're supposed to. The threshold criteria answers that question before it even gets asked. After 90 days of installing just these two structural changes, here's what was different. Those check-in meetings were practically gone. The unnecessary meetings came off the calendar, not because she stopped being available, but because the structure was now resolving the decisions that those meetings were scheduled to resolve. Her client escalation load dropped significantly, not to zero. I mean, let's be honest, some things should still reach her, but the things that were reaching her before because of unclear authority, those were handled, no more. And this is one of my favorites. She took a long weekend, fully off. Her team handled everything that came up because the structure she installed had given them everything they needed to act without her. When she got out of the way of the gazillion decisions that didn't need her, she could prioritize spending her time and efforts on the strategic moves that she'd been telling herself she'd get to for over a year. So this isn't an inspiration story, it's a structural outcome. The same team, the same company, the same founder. Different structure, different results. Here's what's exciting for you, or at least it should be if you're a founder and this story is resonating with you. This story isn't a one-off, and it's not a function of her particular industry or her unique team or something that's specific to her situation. The structural pattern I described, capable team, growing revenue, founder still the hub of the wheel, it shows up across all company sizes, industries, revenue levels, and team compositions. The pattern is consistent because the root cause is consistent. The structure that works when you're a company of 3 doesn't automatically update when you become a company of 15 or 50. And nobody tells you to update it. So it keeps running the old operating system long after the company's outgrown it. What the CEO Decision Reset does is map the current state of your decision traffic, where decisions are actually going, why they're going there, and where they should be going instead. Then it builds the structure you need, the decision map, the threshold criteria, and the authority transfer that makes it real and makes it hold. If anything in this story sounds familiar, if you heard your own situation in any part of it, I want you to go watch the free Decision Reset webinar. The link is in the show notes, and when you're ready to build this in your company, enrollment is open. I'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to Burn On, Not Out. If decisions are still flowing back to you, don't just take notes. Install structure. Watch the CEO Decision Reset to see exactly how the founder bottleneck forms structurally and what gets installed to remove it. The link is in the show notes. Until next week, structure before strategy.